difference between Marxism and anarchism, and why have we chosen the path of scientific socialism. To put together a presentation because actually since we formed this party, this isn't a topic we've really gone into. Some of us who were around in the days before we formed this party will remember having, discussions and study sessions on the topic of anarchism, but we haven't given any serious time, space or attention to it since we set up the party. And I think it is important for us to address it, in particular because with the Social Democrats being, and all the people who hang around social democracy, so all the Trotskyists and the revisionists, as the Labour Party becomes more and more isolated and exposed to working people, the Trotskyian revisionists who've spent 60 odd years telling everybody vote Labour, it's the party of the workers, are also imploding. Number one, because they also stand exposed, and number two, because the gravy train that they were all feeding off is drying up. So for two reasons, the whole bunch of them are pretty well discredited in the eyes of serious thinking people. So of course people look for alternatives. Now anarchism's been chugging away for a really long time, since before social democracy in fact. But today, the manifestations of anarchism, for example, eco-warriors or direct action groups, are very appealing to exactly the kind of people who should be joining us. Kind of people who want to do something about changing society, but haven't really understood how to do it, don't have the theoretical grasp to see what the limits are of the direct action brigades and of anarchist type of no hierarchy, no organisation, no state kind of approach to politics are. So, we've asked Comrade Brar to put together this presentation for today, and we really hope that afterwards, we can have a good discussion. Okay, so without further ado, Mr. Brar.
First, comrades, thank you for taking time off to attend this seminar. I hope it will prove useful, and more importantly, I hope that my presentation and what Comrade Ella has for you in the afternoon would provoke a lot of discussion, because I think it's participation from you that we need to get through a subject which is generally regarded as dry, not something that interests people. It's not really exciting to discuss, but it is very exciting to discuss. I would, of course, be obliged to spend more time on Marx's dialectical and historical materialism than on anarchism. If for no other reason, there's much more substance and meat in it, and you need to know why modern socialism, scientific socialism, flows directly out of that theory. It's not something accidental that Marx and Engels made dialectical and historical materialism their philosophy, because it is through that philosophy that you come to the conclusion there's no alternative to modern socialism. Not in the way that Jehovah's Witnesses would say thy end is in sight, but how the historical development has brought us to a point where humanity is faced with either going over to socialism or having no future, whatever. Anarchism, the first thing you'd ask is, why are we discussing anarchism? What's the relevance of it? I think the best answer that I could give you is in the words of Eleanor Marx, Marx's youngest daughter. She wrote she translated it from German. Initially it was in Russian, but it was translated to German. She translated from German to English Plekhanov's pamphlet, written in 1895, Anarchism and Socialism. I had it downloaded and I read it twice. I can't see, having read it, I'm any wiser. Not because Plekhanov is dense. He's very, very good writer. He's excellent. I'd recommend anybody to read Plekhanov. But because he's dealing with a dense subject where really the people who are putting forward their theories do not know what they're about. He's giving the history of anarchism from its founder, who is actually not known to be a founder. Everybody thinks the founder was Proudhon. But historically speaking, the real founder was somebody whose pseudonym was Max Turner. The real name was Caspar Schmidt. And he's the one who's criticized by Marx and Engels, young Marx and Engels, in the Holy Family. And in the preface, Eleanor Marx says, there are those who think that the precious time of so remarkable a writer and profound a thinker as George Plekhanov is simply wasted in pricking anarchist windbags. But unfortunately, there are many of the younger or of the more ignorant sort who are inclined to take words for deeds, high-sounding phrases for acts, mere sound and fury for revolutionary activity. And those who are young or too ignorant to know that such sound and fury signify nothing. So we are trying to aim at people who are either young and therefore full of revolutionary zeal, or ignorant, who know nothing and are easily infatuated by the right turn of phrases, or what sounds to them the right turn of phrase, just as they are attracted by Trotskyism. Because Trotskyism is also well known for having good signbouts. They would have done very well if they were standing in elections with proper bourgeois rhetoric, if you like. So we need to discuss that, because it really waylays a lot of people who should by all accounts be with us, who should be following the line of Marxist scientific socialism. There's been a very long dispute between anarchism and socialism. Right from its inception, anarchism has fought against Marxism, and Marxism has fought against anarchism. So Marx and Engels had the time to criticize Max Turner in the 1840s, early 1840s. They had the time in 1848 to criticize Proudhon when he came with his book, which was called The Philosophy of Poverty. He made the mistake of sending a copy of his book, newly published, to Marx. And within 3 months, Marx had written an answer to it called, the Poverty of Philosophy, which is worth your read whenever you get a couple of days free. So there's been a struggle. And of course, when Proudhon died, this struggle was taken up by Bakunin and other Russians. Russians seem to have cornered the theoretical market in several fields, from Marxism to anarchism to Narodism and to the peasant party, revolutionary socialists, etc. And so it was taken up by Bakunin, and it was subsequently taken up by Kropotkin, whom Engels and Lenin in one of his books describes as a trencho anarchist, because they came around to supporting the First World War. Bakunin, of course, had tried to ingratiate himself with Marx, and Bakunin was somebody who, unlike Proudhon, was affected by Marx's scientific socialism. So he every now and then has phrases, and as Plekhanov rightly says, he wasn't really somebody who imbibed Marxist socialism. He was infiltrated by it to a certain extent, and that was the end of it. Every now and then he used those arguments, but in the end he could not stop being anti, not just Marx personally, but against the whole theory of Marx and Engels, namely that of scientific socialism. And Bakunin had tried to ingratiate himself with Marx by flattery, and by making various compromises, he was able to join his organization called the Alliance, the First International, the International Working Men's Association. And then when it didn't work out, he then said Marx was a German and a Jew, and therefore autocratic from head to heel. It was a great political criticism, if you like. In the end, the Hague Congress of the First International, which took place in the first week of September 1872, expelled Bakunin and his organization because they had only joined for factional activity in order to undermine the International from within, which they could not do from the outside. And this Congress marked by a struggle between Marxism on one hand and anarchism on the other, made two very important decisions. One was to actually say that the working class needed a party of its own to be able to come to power. It was very essential. Without a working class party, the proletariat could not achieve any of its aims. And secondly, that it was the function of the proletariat to attain political power. Both these items are anathema to anarchism. Anarchism, although I have to contradict myself shortly, only because anarchists contradict themselves. They're opposed to the party of the proletariat. They're opposed to the proletariat coming to power. You have revolution, you smash the bourgeoisie, and everybody goes back to his little village and works out in small communities, indulging basically in commodity production. They want, as Engels was to say, and later on I might be able to say it in his own words, and they work on the basis that commodity production is perfectly fine, but its bad effects must be abolished and the good side of it kept. Engels criticized that indirectly when he was criticizing Proudhon, criticizing Dühring in his book Anti-Dühring, because Dühring came up with some similar idea of communes, and Engels says that he is just like Proudhon, trying to retain commodity production by saying the good side should be kept, and at the same time trying to abolish its bad effects by putting into effect the very laws that brought about those bad effects. There are people, if I can take a biological example, who are not against conception, but they don't want the fetus to grow. You want commodity production, but you don't want it to become proper capitalism. Well, you know that left to itself, it is through commodity production that capitalism develops and eventually becomes monopoly capitalism. Anarchists have never really been able to give a proper answer to the two old questions. Must the old state machine be smashed? Yes, they say it should be smashed, and we say that too. We agree with it. But what then? The old state machine is smashed, but what then do you do? And secondly, what should be put in its place? That is a very, very major difference between anarchists and Marxists. Marxists, while aiming at the complete abolition of the state, recognize that this can only be achieved through the overthrow of the bourgeoisie and the disappearance of classes. When classes have disappeared finally, the state will have no function to perform. The state, by its very nature, has a function to perform as an instrument of one class to oppress and suppress another class. Once there is no longer another class to be oppressed and suppressed, the state really does not have the function. And its functions, to the extent that there are some functions to be performed, become mere administration of things rather than ruling. The political state as such disappears. Anarchists, on the other hand, want to abolish the state completely overnight, tonight, if you like, something that does not take place, failing to understand the conditions which gave rise to the coming on the historical scene of the state and what conditions must be there for it to disappear. That's one. Secondly, Marxists recognize that after the conquest of political power, the proletariat must utterly destroy the old state machine and substitute for it a new one consisting of an organization of armed workers after the type of the Paris Commune. Whether you still follow the type of the Paris Commune or you take the Soviet state, whatever you like, to me, the Soviet state is the best example that the working class had of a proletarian state up to now. Anarchists, on the other hand, while insisting on the destruction of the state machine, have absolutely no clear idea of what the proletariat will put in its place and how it will use its revolutionary power. They even deny that the proletariat should use state power. They deny its revolutionary dictatorship. Next, the Marxists insist that the proletariat be prepared for revolution by utilizing the present state system. Like we take part in parliamentary elections, local elections, we take part in trade union activity, all sorts of things, because the preparation for the next stage cannot be done under the next stage, it can only be done under the present system. Each generation is born into a system of production. It does not choose it. It comes, accepts it, and adapts itself to it. Only in that system it makes preparations. It's no different for us than it was for the bourgeoisie. The bourgeoisie grew and developed within the conditions of feudalism. And it prepared itself, not from the very beginning, they had no idea. They were absolutely always aspiring to get the favor of the kings. They were aspiring themselves to become the bourgeois land-owning class, because that was the class that was the ruling, that was the class that was most respected. And after even the bourgeois revolution in Britain, the industrial bourgeoisie never ceased to aspire to connections with landed aristocracy through marriage or through acquiring land or getting titled, etc. Anarchists don't do that. But on this I have to contradict myself. I have been reading quite a lot of anarchist stuff, not because I'm inclined to read anarchist stuff, but I have been given this assignment by the party, so anything that unpleasant has to be done, I sometimes get the assignment. So I have been reading some stuff. They've even produced magazines like Organize, and they're organizing for anarchy. I was talking to Jyoti the other day. I said, you can see the failure of the anarchists. They've never been able to achieve state power, but then they never desire to achieve it. So to that extent, they've been 100% successful. You can actually say that whereas we have had some failures, anarchism never had failures. If your aim is to achieve nothing, you achieve nothing. And so they've definitely achieved that. So you can't accuse them. You can't accuse them. You can accuse the Trotskyites of not achieving state power anywhere. Although some Trotskyists will say, well, the October Revolution was all Trotsky's work. But the basic thing is, the anarchists cannot be accused of that because they do not wish to be in state power. The worst thing that the proletariat can do is to have a party, that party having a vision that will come to power, and having come to power, having a proletarian state which is being used by the ruling proletariat as an instrument for suppressing the overthrown exploiting classes and preparing the necessary material and spiritual conditions for the transference to a stage where the state will disappear. So I think the accusation against them that they haven't been successful is in itself really misplaced. That is just not understanding the essence of anarchism. In the aftermath of the Hague Conference, Marx and Engels had a controversy with the anarchists. This was a continuing thing, and they wrote a couple of polemical pieces for his Italian socialist journal. And these were against the anarchists, Proudhonists, autonomists, anti-authoritarians, whatever they like to call themselves. And Marx wrote an article called Political Indifferentism for that magazine. And this is what he did, and he put it very trenchantly. He said, if the political struggle of the working class assumes revolutionary forms, wrote Marx, ridiculing the anarchists for their repudiation of politics, if the workers set up their revolutionary dictatorship in place of the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie, they commit the terrible crime of violating principles. For in order to satisfy their wretched, vulgar, everyday needs, in order to crush the resistance of the bourgeoisie, they give the state a revolutionary and transient form instead of laying down their arms and abolishing the state. So you have a revolution, you smash the bourgeoisie, and then you say, well, we lay down our arms, we don't really want to carry on. The nearest you have come across in life is on the screen, Life of Brian. You remember the Suicide Squad appearing. They're trying to rescue Brian Cohen, who is tied to the stake, and the Roman soldiers are there. And as the Suicide Squad arrive, the Roman soldiers take to their heels.
To the damn people's front! Crack Suicide Squad! Suicide Squad! Attack!
And the Suicide Squad do themselves in. That's the suicide that they commit. So the anarchists, the whole noise and fury is aimed at overthrowing the bourgeoisie. For what purpose? So that the proletariat could lay down its arms and go back to the villages. And what do you think the overthrown bourgeoisie will do? It'll take a very small regiment of soldiers to crush all these individual communities one after the other. as happened in the revolutionary uprising in 1874 in Spain. I'll come to that a little later. So as you can see from this article of Marx, he was very, very careful to say that, yes, the proletariat will use the state, but it will be of a transient nature. It's not forever. Marxists are not wedded to the state. It's not something that we want to have forever. It is something we share with the anarchists. And this is where Lenin criticizes the opportunists, that they gave credence to the opportunists by avoiding the question of avoiding the question of the state. Because the opportunists, and opportunism started with the biggest party at that time, the German Social Democratic Labour Party, if you like. And they were not dealing with the question. They actually did not make clear Marx's ideas, as put forward, for example, in his critique of the Gotha program, as put forward in his pamphlet Civil War in France, which was an analysis of the Paris Commune, and many other writings. What exactly is the relationship of the proletarian revolution to the bourgeois state? And what is the relationship of the proletarian power to the working class state? And the Marxian position is the bourgeois state is smashed. It's not taken over. The function of the revolution, if it's a real revolution, is to smash the bourgeois state. And then go on to place to take the place of the bourgeois state, a proletarian state, with its own army, with its own judiciary, with its own system of government, with its own servants, etc. And the function of that is not to act in the interests of freedom. As Engels quite rightly says, once it becomes possible to talk of freedom, once it becomes possible to talk of a people's state, then the state as such has no function to perform. If it represents everybody, what exactly is the function? Its only historical function is to subdue an oppressed and an exploiting class. Once there is no such class, the state has no function to perform. So the proletariat, having come to power, used this proletarian state. It then goes on to create, and I'm working as though there is only one state in the world. And it's a completely different matter when you've got a system of states, when there is socialism in some countries, and capitalism still continues to rule vast areas of the world. That produces its own problems. But the proletariat having come to power, having suppressed the bourgeoisie, institutes socialist planning, brings into existence a socialist system of production, brings the spiritual values that are connected with the rule of the majority. And from the very first day, proletarian state, as Lenin already says, is not quite a state. Because for the first time in the history of the existence of class society and in the history of existence of state, it would be the majority oppressing a minority. A much easier job. If I'm giving trouble to you and you are 20 of you sitting there, you wouldn't have any difficulty controlling me, would you? But if I am the one trying to control you, I have difficulty. Therefore, I have to institute the most draconian methods. Nobody can come in without a pass. There'll be a couple of gendarmes standing there and want to check your political credentials. Are you likely to disagree with this person? And of course, if you should be proven still more uncontrollable, there's always, the stick, the gun, the bayonet, etc. And that's how the ruling classes historically have controlled the ruled class. But once the proletarian state comes into existence, while using violence also, it actually becomes increasingly less necessary for it to use violence, because the majority can suppress the minority without the same degree of violence as accompanies a class state ruled by an exploiting minority. Engels expresses the same ideas that Marx did in his article on political indifferentism. And he wrote an article. It's only about 5 pages. It's called On Authority. You would enjoy reading it, not only for the substance and content of it, but also for the wonderful and very pictorial language that it uses. And I like to cite to you something from that article, in Engels' own words. Engels, first of all, ridicules the Proudhonists and anarchists and anti-authoritarians and autonomists as being muddleheads. He says, I talked to them and I gave them examples. He says, take a modern factory, take a modern railway, take a modern ship on the high seas. And said, Engels, is it not clear that not one of these complex establishments, based on the employment of machinery and planned cooperation of many people, could function without a certain amount of subordination and consequently without a certain amount of authority and power? This power doesn't always have to be of the gun. We work with each other, we cooperate with each other. We had a contingent yesterday at the May Day demonstrations. Could that have come about without the willing cooperation of so many of you? If Paul phoned you and saying, we're going to do this, then you're going to say, well, we're not submitting to that authority. Well, a right spectacle you would have made. Each one did their own thing. Each one did whatever they wanted to. There would be no contingent. There would be no cooperative effort, and there will be no show of any presence on our part at that particular demonstration. So Engels says, when I submitted these arguments like these to the most rabid anti-authoritarians, the only answer they were able to give was the following. Yes, that's true, but here it's not a case of authority which we confer on our delegates, but of a commission entrusted. These gentlemen think, says Engels, that when they change the names of things, they've changed the things themselves. You can call it a commission entrusted, or you can say it's the authority we give to our delegates. It makes not the slightest difference. It's no different than a Catholic priest who on a certain day was not supposed to eat chicken. So he consecrates the chicken as fish and goes on to eat it. Well, you can do that, of course. That is the easily done trick by Parsons as well as by anarchists. And then Engels goes on to say that the question of authority and autonomy are really relative terms, and that the sphere of their application changes with the various phases of social development. That is, it's absurd to take them as absolutes. And he adds that the sphere of application of machinery and large-scale production is constantly expanding. He then passes on from discussing the general question of authority to the specific question of state. And I'd like you to pay attention to this quotation from Engels. If the autonomists, he wrote, confined themselves to saying that the social organization of the future would restrict authority solely to the limits within which the conditions of production render it inevitable, we would understand each other. But they are blind to all facts that make the thing necessary, and they passionately fight the word. The moment you mention state, it really raises their blood pressure. Now, you probably saw a couple of people claiming to be anarchists yesterday came and tried to disrupt us, standing in one corner. We were not doing anything, and they were shouting. And I said to one young man, "Sir, why are you trying to do that?" He said to me, "I'm not sir, don't call me sir." So I said, "I'm only calling you sir because I don't know your name. I don't know you from Adam. So how am I supposed to refer? If I had said Mr., then you say I'm probably putting you down. So could you tell me how I am to address you?" Anyway, in the end, we got rid of him. Engels carries on. Why do the anti-authoritarians not confine themselves to crying out against political authority, the state? All the socialists agreed that the political state, and with it the political authority, will disappear as a result of the coming social revolution. That is, that public functions will lose their political character and be transformed into the simple administrative functions of watching over the true interests of society. But the anti-authoritarians demand that the authoritarian political state be abolished at one stroke, even before social conditions that gave birth to it have been destroyed. They demand that the first act of the social revolution shall be the abolition of authority. And this argument of Engels literally becomes, if you like, a panegyric, a hymn in favor of violent revolution. He says, have these gentlemen ever seen a revolution? A revolution is certainly the most authoritarian thing there is. It is the act whereby one part of the population imposes its will upon the other by means of rifles, bayonets, and cannon. Authoritarian means, if there be such at all. And if the victorious party does not want to have fought in vain, it must maintain this rule by means of the terror which its arms inspire in the reactionaries. Would the Paris Commune have lasted a single day if it had not made use of this authority of the armed people against the bourgeois? Should we not, he says by way of criticism of the Paris Commune, should we not, on the contrary, reproach it for not having used it freely enough? Therefore, either one of two things. Either the anti-authoritarians don't know what they're talking about, in which case they are creating nothing but confusion, or they do know, and in that case they are betraying the movement of the proletariat. In either case, they serve reaction. So that was Marx and Engels' position, and it is clear from what I have cited you from their writings and their pronouncements that the anarchist idea of abolition of the state is muddled and non-revolutionary. It's precisely the revolution in its rise and development with its specific tasks in relation to violence, authority, power, and the state that the anarchists do not wish to see. And whenever they had a chance of coming close to power, a reality thrown out through the front door creeps back by the window. One chance for them to show their mettle was the Paris Commune. And although the anarchists tried in vain to claim that the Paris Commune was an implementation of their ideas, Paris Commune was actually just the opposite of it. The workers, having overthrown the bourgeois state, in Paris at least, what do they go on to do? They institute a commune. Now the commune sounds like a very innocuous word. This commune was 300,000 armed Parisians going around with guns. You wouldn't want to trifle with them, right? And they instituted the perfect system, and they did exactly what needed to be done. They should have done more. They should have mobilized their forces and marched on the center of reaction in Versailles. They did not do that. They should have nationalized the Bank of France. They should have done various things. And the fact that they could survive for 2 months while being surrounded by the Prussian troops. And what was, by the way, Bakunin's answer to advice to the French to fight against the invading Prussian armies? Don't have a central command. Don't have an army. You have separate communities, each village fighting against the Germans. The Frenchmen had more sense than to follow that advice. They didn't. Here are the Germans, here are the Prussians, with a highly efficient, organized, and well-oiled military machine, commanded by a general staff, headed by a chief of the staff, who have the will to subdue the population. And you're asking them, don't unite to fight against them. It's like at the Battle of Stalingrad, you were to say, each state will elect its own commission, own delegates, and they will decide how they will fight against the invading Nazis. Nobody took notice of it. The Paris Commune was a perfectly good demonstration and a refutation of the anarchist stance. Then, shortly after that, they got a chance to prove themselves in the uprisings that took place in Spain. Now, whenever they took part, they refuted their own theories completely. First of all, they formed themselves part of the government. But of course, following the anarchist principles, they divided the whole area into various communities, etc., which could be just suppressed by a couple of generals sent by the reactionary authorities, General Campos and General Pavia. They just took them one by one. And Engels said, this uprising had a tremendous chance of success if it had been conducted in the normal Spanish style, whereby you actually succeed in one place, you mobilize the forces, and you, with the soldiers and the other supporters, you march to the next town and you subdue that, and you carry on till it becomes an unstoppable avalanche. That's not what happened. The anarchists, whenever their principles were put into effect, worked towards the defeat of that evolution. But they did two things. One, they took part in the very governments that they had in advance declared an anathema. We do not take part in any government, because all government is evil, all state power is evil. And when they took part as junior partners to a party which you would not probably know of, called the intransigents, which was just basically bourgeois, and who used the anarchists when they could, and later on gave them kicks and shunted them out. And Engels wrote a little pamphlet, 15-20 pages, The Bakuninists at Work. And the best thing for you to do is to read the pamphlet. But at the end of the pamphlet, he comes to certain conclusions, which, if you would bear with me, I'd like to read to you. He says, let us now look at the results of our investigation. 1. As soon as they were confronted with a serious revolutionary situation, the Bakuninists were compelled to throw their whole previous program overboard. To begin with, they sacrificed their dogma of political and, above all, electoral abstention. Then came the turn of the anarchy, the evolution of the state. Instead of abolishing the state, they tried, on the contrary, to set up a number of new small states. They went on to abandon their principles that the workers must not participate in any revolution that did not have as its aim the immediate and complete emancipation of the proletariat, and took part in a movement whose purely bourgeois character was patently evident. Finally, they trampled underfoot the principle they themselves had only just proclaimed, that the establishment of the revolutionary government is but a deception and a new betrayal of the working class. By comfortably installing themselves in the government jantas, jantas is just a name, it's not a derogatory name in this case, but comfortably installing themselves in the government jantas of the separate towns. Moreover, almost always as an impotent minority, paralyzed and politically exploited by the bourgeois. 2. Denying the principle that they had always preached, they did so in the most cowardly and false manner and under the pressure of a guilty conscience. Neither the Bakuninists themselves nor the masses they led joined the movement with any program or any idea at all of what they wanted. What was the natural outcome of this? It was that the Bakuninists either obstructed any movement, as in Barcelona, and they were to repeat that during the Republican struggle in the 30s, or found themselves drawn into isolated, unplanned, and senseless uprisings, as in Alcoy, Sanlúcar de Barrameda, or that the leadership of the insurrection fell into the hands of the bourgeois intransigents, as happened in the majority of cases. Thus, when it came to action, the ultra-revolutionary cries of the Bakuninists gave way to evasion, uprisings doomed to defeat in advance, or adherence to a bourgeois party which not only subjected the workers to the most shameful political exploitation, but even rewarded them with blows. 3. All that remains of the so-called principles of anarchy, free federation of independent groups, etc., is the boundless, senseless disintegration of the revolutionary means of struggle, which enabled the government to subdue one town after another with a handful of troops, practically unrestricted. Finally, 4, the final outcome of this whole farce is that not only has the once so numerous and well-organized Spanish International, both false and real, i.e. anarchist and the one that followed the First International, found itself involved in the collapse of the intransigents, so that it is today de facto dissolved. But moreover, that all sorts of invented crimes without which the Philistines of all countries cannot imagine a workers' revolution are being heaped upon it, thereby making impossible, at least for many years to come, the international reorganization of the Spanish proletariat. Once you suffer such a blow, it takes time to recover. And Engels concludes with the sentence, in a word, the Spanish Bakuninists have given us an unsurpassed example of how not to make a revolution. Modern day anarchists, if you look at their literature, obviously organized, but they organize for anarchy, and they have magazines. Sometimes they call it Black Flag. There's another one which is called Organized. So they are organizing, and when you look at the small print, what are they organizing for? Well, organization is necessary to give people the skills and the training. Now, what could be the skills and training that they're going to give people? How to kneecap a rich capitalist, how to kill a policeman, how to smash ATMs that dispense money, which all of you use, and it only annoys people who go to get some money and cannot get their money. So it's basically inconvenience people. And some of them are now beginning to say, this is bloody stupid. Working people don't recognize our activity while we're involved in it. They were against elections, and some are now participating in the elections. What are the elections for? And some of them produce extremely funny election leaflets. There's an election leaflet which has got a picture of David Cameron, Ed Miliband, Clegg, and UKIP leader Nigel Farage. And the hashtag says, "We are going to mass debate." And the line below says, "They're all fucking wankers." I must say it's very funny. It's quite good to read. The leaflet has been banned, that it really offends against public morality. Public morality, they're pushing pornography 24 hours, non-stop, everywhere. How would this be against public? So I'm on the side of anarchists putting out that leaflet. But what message does it give? It gives nothing. Yes, you had a very humorous turn of phrase to abuse your opponents. But abuse is not an argument. It does not mobilize anybody. It does not teach anybody. Or mindless things like that. This is a editorial from a journal called The Black Flag at the time of Seattle disturbances against the meetings with the World Bank and the IMF. Capitalism? Question mark? No thanks. We will burn your fucking banks. So chanted a group of black-clad anarchists in Seattle. A slogan of immense theoretical power and clarity. I mean, sometimes you've got to give them sense of humor. A slogan of immense theoretical power and clarity. It sums up well the promise and power of anarchism. We have the politics to understand the world, and more importantly, the tactics, direct action. There's another one which said, we have the ballot and the bricks. The ideas, a free and libertarian socialism, and ideals, liberty, equality, solidarity, to change the world for the better. Needless to say, after the event, hordes of self-proclaimed vanguardists directed at you, comrades, will publish articles trying to educate us poor, thick anarchists of the errors of our petty bourgeois, lumpen proletarian ways. Of course, it never enters their minds that we are anarchists, not because we have never heard of or misunderstood Marxist Leninism. We are anarchists because we understand Leninism. We reject the ideas of vanguardism and embrace the lessons learned by the people actually active in class struggle. Kropotkin was right. Anarchism originated in everyday struggles and draws its ideas and ideals from those struggles. Struggles such as those in Seattle and organizing and organizations that preceded it. That is why Seattle is so important. It was an expression of the class struggle which inspires and informs anarchism. And from this struggle, anarchist ideas will grow. Black Flag congratulates all involved. Well done. One in the eye for capitalism in the state. Drake Shaxton gets results yet again. Now, wonderful though those sites were on the screen, they've disappeared without any trace. What are their lasting effects? If the October Revolution was made, even after its betrayal by crucified revisionism, it has left ideals behind which cannot be got rid of. But what have the Seattle riots done? Absolutely nothing. Yeah, you can express simply that people will say, we'll burn your fucking banks. Well, okay, you burn the bank, so what? There are other bank branches that be there. How many banks are you going to burn? Instead of getting rid of the whole racket and putting the proletariat into power to sort out the future of humanity, they are against vanguardism, they're against the proletarian activity, they're against politics. Their only emphasis on economics. And to that extent, there's a lot more in common between anarchism and what Lenin called in 1902, 1903, economism in Russia, where the economists were advising the working class to abstain from politics and only take part in the economic struggle. Anarchists sometimes even go further than that. What's the point of economic struggles? You raise wages, the bourgeoisie will raise prices. What's the point of you having a higher wage? They will make you work faster, and so your wage disappears. And so all kinds of lunatic arguments, basically to depress the morale, if you like, of the working class movement. So we have a duty to fight against anarchism, because it's really a non-starter from the beginning. You can't have a political party, you can't take part in politics, but if by some chance, through some anarchist rising, you gain state power, then that state must be dismantled straight away. It really is from nothing, through nothing, to nothing, as Engels would say. Yeah. Well, I'll try to indicate what Marxism stands for. In contrast to anarchism, Marxism has a very well worked out scientific theory about life in general, about the phenomena of nature in general, to humanity and the life of society in particular. It has there have been various trends in socialism. There's been reformism, there's been anarchism, there's been Marxism, and myriad other varieties. By the beginning of the second part of the 19th century, Marxism had won theoretical victory. And after the October Revolution, Marxism-Leninism has won theoretical and practical victory. And as far as I am concerned, there is no other socialism than Marxism-Leninism. People may call themselves socialists, anarchists call themselves revolutionaries, socialists, etc., but it doesn't make them socialists. They have no definite idea of where society has come from, what are the laws that govern its development, and how we find ourselves in the present position. The whole point is that Marxism and anarchism are built on completely different principles. The point of departure of anarchism is the individual. According to anarchism, the emancipation of the individual is the principal prerequisite for the emancipation of the masses. Hence its motto, everything for the individual. With 20 of us sitting there, I just take into my head, but you're talking nonsense. What is the point of having this seminar? I just simply walk away. And you can't deny me, because it's my right. Equally, contradictorily, if you were trying to deny me, you will be only exercising your personal right to deny me this. So, you get yourself into a contradiction. If everybody can do whatever they like to do, then it is about the most authoritarian ideology that you can follow if you like. On the other hand, the point of departure of Marxism is the masses. And according to it, the emancipation of the masses is the principal prerequisite for the emancipation of the individual. Hence, its motto, everything for the masses. Marxism has a philosophy, and that philosophy is called dialectical and historical materialism. And because I have got very little time left, I will be very, very quick in giving you some of the main points. I could actually spend a lot of time discussing it, but we haven't got the time. Marxism's method of approach to the phenomena of nature as well as to the life of society is, its method is dialectical. What does dialectical mean? Well, the word dialectical comes from the Greek word dialego, where the ancient Greeks used to be able to have discussions with each other. And their idea was that you came up with your ideas and you tried through argument find holes and contradictions in the argument of your opponent. And in this way, by continuous discussions and prolonged conversations, you'd be able to arrive at a certain conclusion which was correct, which got rid of the contradictions. And of course, this is a method that can, of course, also be applied to the not just discussions between philosophers. It can be applied to studying the phenomena of nature. What is nature? You look at the phenomena of nature and you say, nature gives proof of dialectics, that there are laws in nature, that the unfolding phenomena are nothing but a disclosure and a resolution of the contradictions inherent in nature. So the dialectics applied to the phenomena of nature becomes dialectical materialism. And if you extend it further to the life of society, to human beings, it becomes historical materialism. As is very well understood that Hegel was the one who formulated the principles of modern dialectics, and Marx and Engels never cease to acknowledge the debt that humanity owes to Hegel for expounding the basic principles of dialectics. But it would be wrong to think that Marx and Engels' dialectics is the same as Hegelian dialectics. Marx and Engels only took the rational kernel, K-E-R-N-E-L, of Hegel's dialectics and developed it to a higher scientific level. This is what Marx says in his introduction to Capital Volume 1. My dialectic method is fundamentally not only different from the Hegelian, but is its direct opposite. To Hegel, the process of thinking, which under the name of the idea he even transforms into an independent subject, is the creator of the real world, and the real world is only the external phenomenon of the idea. Hegel, who had given a brilliant formulation of dialectics, his whole system fell precisely because he was an idealist and not a materialist. With me, and this is a sentence that's really worth even learning by heart, with me, says Marx, on the contrary, the ideal is nothing else than the material world reflected by human mind and translated into forms of thought. Yeah? Just think of it. The more you think of it, the more you feel empowered by the power of the idea behind it. As far as materialism is concerned, Marx and Engels gave credit to Feuerbach as the philosopher who restored materialism to its rights. But this does not mean that Marx and Engels' materialism is the same as that of Feuerbach. They only took its essence and developed it to a higher stage, casting aside its idealistic and religious ethical encumbrances, and developed it into a scientific theory. I want to basically indicate the principal features of Marxist dialectics very, very quickly indeed. The first feature of Marxist dialectics is that, contrary to metaphysics, dialectics does not regard nature as accidental agglomeration of things, of phenomena, unconnected with or isolated from and independent of each other, but as a connected and integral whole in which things, phenomena, are organically connected with and dependent on and determined by each other. Secondly, contrary to metaphysics, dialectics holds that nature is not in a state of rest and in immobility, stagnation and immutability, that it's constantly moving and there's a continuous movement. Some things are dying away, some things are being born. And therefore the phenomena should be considered from the standpoint of their movement, their change, their development. They're coming into being and they're going out of being. And so it's not dead, like things have always been like this and things will always be like this. Thirdly, dialectics holds that the process of development is not a simple process of growth, where quantitative changes do not lead to qualitative changes. In nature, as well as in society, quantitative changes lead to qualitative changes. And Marx and Engels give a number of examples how this takes place. And it's not a movement in a circle, it's not a simple repetition of that which has already occurred, but an onward and upward movement as a transition from the old qualitative state to a new qualitative state. The simplest example that Engels gives is from the area of physics, where water, in one case, through the either the lowering or the raising of the temperature, in one case it turns into ice, and in another case it turns into steam. So if it is given pressure, water is heated to a certain degree, it turns into steam. If it's cooled to a certain degree, it becomes ice.
So in liquid water, the water molecules not only vibrate, they can also rotate and slide past each other. And this is what allows the substance to flow. At even higher temperatures, the water molecules become free of that liquid and turn into water vapor. In that state, they are very, very far apart and moving very quickly. So the major differences between solid, liquid, and gas are the motion of the particles and the distance between them. Of course, you may want to meditate on these differences some more.
Now, when it is changing from one state to the other, change is very imperceptible. I mean, you can judge it yourself. This is an easy experiment that even somebody like me who has no scientific training can do it. If I'm boiling water, the moment I apply some heat to it, it's not hot straight away. I can put my finger in it, but slowly and surely, unobserved, a change is taking place in the temperature of water, and suddenly you find it's bubbling away and steam is coming out.
Energy is also needed to change a liquid to a gas. So, what's happening to the particles this time? In a liquid, the particles are free to move around. Heating causes them to move around more quickly. Those which have enough energy escape from the liquid, forming a gas. This is evaporation.
And likewise, the other way around. Likewise, you see in chemistry, the arrangement of our organism. As Engels says, chemistry may be called the science of qualitative changes which take place in bodies as the effect of changes of quantitative composition. And he gives the example, let's say that if instead of the ordinary 2, it becomes a completely different body called ozone. And he gives lots of examples. If you've done O-level chemistry, you would know the various formulas. And fourthly, contrary to metaphysics, dialectics holds that internal contradictions are inherent in all things and all phenomena of nature. They have their negative and positive sides, a past and a future, something dying away and something developing. And it's the struggle between these two opposites, between the old and the new, between that which is dying away and that which is being born, between that which is disappearing and that which is developing, that constitutes the internal content of the process of development, the internal content of the transformation of quantitative changes into qualitative changes. So accordingly, the process of development from the lower to the higher takes place not as a harmonious upholding of the phenomena, but as a disclosure of the contradictions inherent in the things and as a struggle of opposite tendencies. And as Lenin said in his pamphlet, in his book rather, Empirical-Criticism and Materialism, development is the struggle of opposites. So it can be easily understood from these principal features of dialectics, how important it is to extend the principles of dialectics from the phenomena of nature to the life of society. Society also should be studied not as stagnating and once forever determined, but in its movement. Society must also be studied not as a kind of, different parts of it as isolated phenomena, but one in the context of all the other phenomena of society. Society also must be seen not moving in some kind of repetitive fashion, but going from a lower to a higher stage, not all evolutionary and slow and peaceful changes, but also at certain stages involving upheavals and revolutions. This is precisely what leads to the change of systems, the revolutions. Society has known various systems. It has known primitive communism. How did primitive communism become slave system? There is a basis for it in production. I'll come back to that point, that I need to make that point before I finish with my presentation here. The slave system in turn gave way to the feudal system, which in turn made way for capitalism. And since then we have seen how capitalism actually gave rise to socialism. And it does come about because of the internal contradictions within the system. Those internal contradictions lead to changes which actually impel society forward. Anarchists, for their part, always have reviled Hegel. They don't actually take anything seriously in Hegel. They say, well, he was a conservative. Well, he was. He was a monarchist, And therefore they say, since Hegel was not a revolutionary, and therefore his system is, so his dialectics are reactionary. Well, everybody knew that Hegel was a conservative. Marx and Engels knew more than anybody else. But that does not mean that Hegelian dialectics are not revolutionary. And notwithstanding that, one of the accusations that anarchists make against Marxism is that it is metaphysics. Marxism, that spent so many years fighting against metaphysics, is accused by the anarchists of being metaphysical in its conception. Anarchists who call other people metaphysicists actually themselves give birth to such absurd ideas as the eternal system of of justice, equality, fraternity. They've always been there. It's natural to human beings that they should be equal. It was natural to them under the slave system. It was natural to them under the feudal system. It's natural to them under capitalism. It will be also in the future anarchist commune that they have in mind for humanity. Likewise, they condemn Feuerbach because they say Feuerbach had all sorts of funny ideas. Yes, he had funny ideas, but they failed to see that Feuerbach was a materialist who made a lot of contribution to the development of philosophy by saying that the matter was primary and the spirit was secondary. Anarchists are unable to actually separate Hegel's dialectics from Hegel's conservative political ideas. They're unable to separate Feuerbach's materialist teaching from some of the quirks that accompanied the enunciation of that philosophical system by him. If the Marxist method is dialectical, its philosophical basis is materialism. And the principal features of materialism are that, contrary to idealism, it regards the world as the embodiment of reality. That reality is there, it exists independently of human beings. Reality is not what I perceive. If I perceive correctly, my perception is what reality tells me it is. So there's been two camps in philosophy, historically speaking. One that regards matter as primary and spirit as secondary, and that camp is the camp of materialism. And the other camp is that regards spirit as primary, idea as primary, consciousness as primary, and matter as secondary. That is the camp of idealism. So materialism holds material reality to be objective reality in existence, independent of the will of man. Whether that wall exists or not is not dependent on my perception. That wall is there. If I'm not gone completely nutty, I should perceive that that is a wall. And my ability only extends as far as being able to perceive it correctly. And if we perceive it incorrectly, if I think it's imaginary, I'll walk into it and it'll bash me on my head. I will soon learn a lesson in materialism. That's what Dr. Johnson did to somebody. There's an anecdote. He kicked some idealist in the shin. So he said, "Why did you do that? It hurt me." He said, "That's how I prove the validity of materialism." Secondly, contrary to idealism, according to which the mind really exists, and that the material world only exists in our mind, etc., etc., Marxist materialism holds that the matter, nature, being is an objective reality existing outside and independent of our mind. That thought is a product of the matter, which in its development has reached a very high degree of perfection, namely of the brain. And brain is the organ of thought. As Lenin said, only brainless philosophy could actually preach ideas without the brain that thinks them. You cannot think of ideas without the brain. And what is brain? Highly developed matter, reached a certain state of perfection that it's able to think. thirdly, materialism holds that the world not only exists, but the world is knowable. There's a possibility of knowing the world. And practice and scientific experimentation help humanity to know the world. It does not believe in the Kantian thesis of things in themselves, things which can never be known to human beings. And so Marx's idea is things are knowable. And if you apply these principles of dialectical historical materialism to society, then you come to know that society has been changing. Society has not been stagnant. What exactly is it that moves society forward? It could be population, but although you need population in order to practice any social system, you can't have without population. That does not have a determining influence. It could be climate. You need certain kind of climate for human beings to survive, but it hasn't got a determining influence on the movement of society from one phase to the other. So what exactly is it that moves society forward? And Marx, and this is really a great discovery of Marx, it is production. Human beings, in order to live, have to produce. Whether they were hunter-gatherers, or whether they were domesticators of animals, or whether they are running modern mills and railways, etc., human beings have to produce to live. And in order to produce to live, there are two things that are necessary for that production. One is people who work, human beings, and secondly, the tools with which they work. They are the ones that come. That's one aspect of production. But these productive forces only define the relationship of human beings to nature, if you like, to the objects that they are working on. There's another side to production, that is the relations of men, and I use the word men in human being sort. I don't exclude women before somebody hits me on the head. The relationship of men to each other. These are relations of production. And for production to take place, you need both. And you need the productive forces, and you need, of course, the relations of production. It is better that they be in accord with each other. Because if they are in accord with each other, they give a push to production. They actually work for the development of the productive forces. It is only when the relations of production lag behind the development of productive forces that there is an incongruity, there is a problem. And relations of production cannot for far too long lag behind the productive forces, because if they are, they will cause crisis in production. Better not to go to old system, just take the modern day examples. There is an incongruity between the productive forces which are social in our day. Everything is done by masses of people in large factories or in society at large. To just look at the example, you have a railway signal. There's somebody who's controlling a railway signal. If he does not actually perform his job of giving the right signal, what would be the result? The trains will either not run at all or they will crash. And by doing so, he is able to prevent thousands and thousands of other people from traveling and going to work and going about their business. So production in our day has become so social that one person's job affects a lot of other people. Whether you're working in a hospital, whether you're working on the railways, whether you're working in aviation industry or any other industry, the work of one affects others. It's not like peasants in old society. If one peasant didn't work one day, yes, he wouldn't work, he wouldn't produce, but it doesn't stop anybody else from doing anything. But under the modern conditions, everyone's work affects everybody else. And that's why when teachers or doctors threaten to go on strike, they said, you are harming society. Kids won't learn anything. Mothers won't be able to go to work because kids are not schooled, and all sorts of other complications. But what does that mean? This society has reached a point where production is social. And we only have disputes about wages, about this and the other, because the relations of production in our society, due to private appropriation, are lagging behind the development of productive forces. These relations are an incongruity. And that incongruity is actually the basis of the social revolution. In the end, humanity comes to realize working class primarily, that this system is not delivering. It's causing us misery. There are recurrent economic crises, and they have effects. Not only that production has stopped, we cannot have food on the table, we cannot buy the things that we need to live. And there is a revolutionary side to it when relation to production lag behind the productive forces. That is the basis of the revolution. The working class says, it is too much for us to put up with this, and let's get rid of it. So modern socialism is based on the development of the productive forces and the essential requirement that the relation to production do not lag behind. But when we say productive forces are determining, a lot of people accuse Marxism of being deterministic, that it places no emphasis on ideas. That is utterly false. Marxism lays tremendous store by ideas. What it is trying to explain is the origin of the ideas. I mean, there are fools who will say, if Marx was born in the 13th century, he could have written the 3 volumes of Capital. Because if ideas are most important to you, this idea is just an accidental occurrence. Somebody with Marx's quirky ideas could have produced Capital Volume 1, 2, 3 in the 13th century. Of course, it couldn't have been produced, because for Marx to write Capital, there had to be capitalist production at the very least in existence, whose laws he could study, whose inner contradictions he could reveal for the benefit of society in general and working class in particular. So ideas originate on the basis of the development of productive forces. But once the ideas have origin, they have a tremendously revolutionary and transforming role and mobilizing role to perform. For example, the bourgeoisie, having developed bourgeois production under the feudal system to a point, found that its further development was being impeded by the maintenance of the feudal system. So they had to get rid of it, and they got rid of it. And in order to get rid of it, they needed ideas. And the ideas themselves of the French materialists of the 18th century Enlightenment were the product of the development of the productive forces. These materialists did not solve every problem, but they were the ideal representatives of the bourgeoisie waiting in the wings to be the ruling class. So when they idealized man with freedom, equality, and fraternity, they were only idealizing without even realizing themselves that they were representing the third estate, which was waiting in the wings to come to power. Very soon after it came to power, fraternity turned into its opposite, equality turned into its opposite, liberty turned into its opposite. But that was then, by which time it was too late. Either the French materialists were dead, or some of them became disgruntled and became quiet. Some of them might have even gone into opposition. But the bourgeoisie was well and truly ensconced. But those ideas were products of the development of productive forces. And once they had arisen, they had a truly revolutionary, transforming effect. That's why Marx says that once ideas have been gripped by the masses, they become a material force. That does not mean ideas are the same as the productive forces. It does mean they're a product of the productive forces, but having originated in the productive forces, they become a very, very revolutionary, great revolutionary force that have a transformative role. Today we stand at a point where, and we have stood at a point for 100 years, whereby the relations of production are violently in discord with the productive forces. Productive forces are crying out to be socialized in the sense that they become property of the entire people. Only then can impediments to production be actually removed. And if the working class uses the theory of Marxism to remove these, it is actually trying to do that and is being successful in several places, precisely because they're trying to move society in a direction whereby there is no impediment to the development of productive forces. If humanity wants to have the era of plenty, the era of satisfaction of human beings' needs, whereby each one gives according to his ability, but receives in accordance with his needs. It can only be done by removing the impediments that are acting as a brake on the development of the productive forces, which socialism alone can do, which the proletarian power alone can do, and then actually make the way for the extinction forever of the exploiting classes and laying down the material, spiritual, and economic conditions which will make the state disappear. And at last, probably at the far end of it, we will be able to meet anarchism in the museum of history, which human beings would look back and saying there were weird people who used to propose such unscientific and impractical ideas. I had a lot more to say, but my time doesn't allow me. Thank you for listening to me.
We got the guillotine. We got the guillotine. You better run. We got the guillotine. We got the guillotine. You better run. We got the guillotine. We got the guillotine. You better run. Talk about our show. Be about it. I know. Talk about our show. Be about it. Hey, you! We got your war. We're at the gates. We're at your door. We got the guillotine. We got the guillotine. You better run. We got the guillotine. We got the guillotine. You better run. We got the guillotine. We got the guillotine. You better run. We got the guillotine.
We wanna thank you for flying with us. We know you could've stayed home, just cried and cussed. May or your guns go off if it's time to bust. May or they tanks have time to rust. They got the army turning bullets in the gold. They got the hookers turning tricks in the cold. And every time the police kicks in the dough, an angel gas breaks dips in the O. And even if a D-boy flips in my O, it ain't enough to buy shit anymore. Sleep in the doorway, piss on the floor. Look in the sky, wait for missiles to show. It's finna blow, cause they got the TV, we got the truth. They own the judges and we got the proof. We got hella people, they got helicopters. They got the bombs and we got the
We got the guillotine. We got the guillotine. You better run.
I just spit the dope lines, I don't snort them. Tell the boss to call police to escort them. You don't ride out them lines, you just quote them. Get offline, plug into this modem. No, you can't outvote them, the rules are still golden. On the jewels we holdin' if we guardin' our scrotum. If you press the ear to the turf that is stolen, you can hear the sound of limitations exploding. Please sir, may we have another portion with children of the beast that dodge the abortion. Next place firm between the floor and the portion. When shut your shit down, don't call it extortion. Caution, we're coming for your head. So call the feds and get filed and shred. Every textbook read said bring you the bread, but guess what, we got you instead.
We got the